My name is Krista Ruther, and I'm here with Jesse Vasquez. We are here to help you be a better landlord. So, Jesse, if the people have been living under a rock and they're not sure who you are or what you do, could you give a brief introduction?
Yeah, well, I've been living under a rock with Squidward for probably the last 35 years, so I'm totally cool with everybody that's living under a rock. And if you haven't heard of me, I want to say hi. My name's Jesse Vasquez. I am here in Central California, over in the Turlock Modesto area. And yeah, I've been in midterm rentals since 2015 before they were cool, and hopefully we are able to give you some information about midterm rentals that can help you steer yourself in that direction.
Beautifully said. You're underselling your knowledge and expertise, but I know that's going to shake out through the questions that I've prepared for you today. So, as you mentioned, midterm rentals are really hot. They've been hot for a while, and you've been in the game for even longer. So, excited to pick your brain about some of the niches in this little industry that you have building up. So I learned a term from watching your YouTube channel, and I'd love to get into it and really unpack this. Could you explain what co-hosting as a rental property investor is?
Yeah, I love co-hosting. So for those of you that don't know what co-hosting is, it's essentially where, and we're going to use you right now, Krista, as an example. So I apologize for that. So Krista has a property. She's a landlord. She has a property in Denver, and she wants to midterm rent, but she doesn't necessarily want to do all the work that's involved with getting that, business up and running because she's got a W-2 job, obviously here at TurboTenant, and doesn't have the time or the energy to be able to do that. So what I would do as a co-host is say, hey, Krista, I'd love to manage your property for you. We'll do all the outreach, marketing, emails, connecting with people, and you're just going to pay us 20% of the revenue that comes through. So essentially, it's a revenue share. So if we make $10,000 on a property and I'm charging 20%, I make $2,000 and you make the eight, and everybody's happy. You make more money than you probably would with a long-term rental, I would assume, and I hope that would be the case. And for me, I'm managing properties already anyway. So this is just another property that I'm able to put under my tool belt and help, business travelers or travel nurses or insurance relocation claims. Like I'm actually able to use your property as a resource and obviously help you too. So essentially, that's what co-hosting is in a nutshell.
Wow, okay. That sounds pretty fantastic. I mean, if I put my landlord hat on, that saves me a lot of time while still earning that revenue. But I am curious, what's the difference between co-hosting and being a property manager?
Yes, that is a great question there. So property management, if you have that umbrella property management, you actually have to have a brokerage license attached to your company, which means a real estate agent or a brokerage company would have to be attached. So co-hosting, and I'm doing air quotes right now for those of you that are watching this, co-hosting is a term that's been around for like, the short-term rental industry for years now, since probably 2010. And essentially, it's just you're not doing all the things that a property manager would do, which would be like taking care of lawn, doing all those things on the back end. You're just essentially handling messages, you're handling all the day-to-day operational stuff, but not the actual things that are involved with the property. So if something breaks, you're not actually calling and scheduling somebody to go fix it. You're calling the owner and saying, hey, the dishwasher doesn't work. Can you send somebody out? So essentially, you're not doing those little tiny things. You're essentially just co-hosting, which is messaging, managing, and that sort of thing.
Interesting. Okay, so it sounds like it's more of the people management side of the business versus like the
Totally.
gritty. Okay. And you mentioned the revenue share. That seems like the main way that a co-host earns money. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how it's played out for you?
Yeah, the thing that I love about co-hosting, and I'll just give everybody a quick example of this, is if you start midterm renting yourself, you will naturally have the Christas of the world start to bring you property. So you start to attract the clients that you'll actually get. And the cool thing about this is that I don't have to actually put any money into it. So I'm getting into the co-hosting with property that people are bringing to me. I'm not essentially putting any money into this. So like if I'm going to midterm rent or buy a property or even arbitrage, which means I rent your house, Krista, from you, and then I sublease that out, I'm not actually spending any money to do that. So with co-hosting, you can essentially get into it for nothing, has a low barrier of entry, which I think is really fascinating. But yeah, you're able to make some pretty good cash to offset, your own properties or just build a business out of it, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Anything that lowers that barrier to entry so that more people can get involved, I think is an avenue worth exploring. So what advice would you have for newer investors who might be looking to leverage their community to find co-hosting opportunities?
Yeah, I always encourage everybody to learn the business before you decide to co-host, which means if you're going to screw up somebody's property, screw up your own first, and then
Sure.
screw up Krista's property, because you'll actually learn so much stuff by managing a property. And you could take a course, or you could go, there's YouTube University, which people are probably watching here, or podcast. You can learn a lot of stuff, but you actually have to do the thing to understand it to a degree where it could be helpful for somebody else. So I'd encourage everybody to really if you're going to get into the midterm space, start to understand what the business model actually is. And naturally, you will have people that will come to you saying, hey, Jess, Krista, can you co-host my property for me? Or I want to make money like you are, but I don't want to do the work. So like you'll automatically start to get those. So I'd encourage everybody to go to real estate meetups, talk about what you want to do, talk about what you're doing, talk about how to run numbers on these properties, because that's one of the most important things is I need to know exactly how much your property would earn, Krista, if I'm going to bring you on as a client. And you want to know that from me as well. So we want to be ballpark what you could potentially earn. And yeah, just try to be as accurate as possible. But again, I think it's one of those things that naturally comes to people that start to short-term or midterm rent. It's a business vertical that is within the niche. So it's pretty cool that once you do it, you'll start, if you want to go that route, you have the ability to build a foundation in a co-hosting business.
Beautiful. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that might be best to start with your own property, your own business, because like as
Yeah.
you said, if you're going to mess anybody's property up, it probably is safer to mess up your own. Hopefully you won't. We have plenty of tools to help you at TurboTenant so you can run your business in a streamlined fashion. But understanding the workings, especially if your local market there, and then branching out using local RIAs or local groups so that you can start kind of tapping into the greater network in your area. Is that fair to say?
Totally. Yeah, I think the network is, I mean, we've all heard this before, your network is your net worth, right? I totally agree to that. And it took me too many years to figure that out, that the more people you're connected to, and this is coming from an introvert, by the way, I'm an introverted person by nature. And I could just tell you that if you are able to get out, talk to people, meet people, shake hands with people, you'll make more money. The more hands you shake, the more money you're going to make, or the more opportunities will be around. And that's just something that it took me way too long to learn. I encourage everybody to get out, be uncomfortable, do the thing that you don't want to do, and actually go shake hands with people, learn stuff, talk to them, and start building a network that could potentially help you build a business because it's so powerful.
Yes, I think when you step into that window of discomfort, right, you have so many more growth opportunities versus maybe following our shared introverted nature and just staying at home where our businesses stay small and very quiet on the profit front, potentially.
Yeah, I just posted something on Twitter the other day, and it was like, if you're not doing something that scares you, then you're not doing something big enough. So like, I
Yeah.
truly believe that. I think, for myself, I've grown a lot in the last couple of years, and it's because I'm doing things that terrify me, like immensely, like getting on stages and speaking. And I hate flying in airplanes, and I do it anyway. Just stuff like that, the little things that you do on a daily basis, it allows you to grow, and I can definitely be an advocate for that because I've learned so much from, yeah, exactly what you just said, stepping out of your comfort zone.
I really love that. I really do. I think that there is so much room to talk about fear and how that plays into investments. But you kind of train yourself, especially your mind, to say, okay, I can do this. I can tolerate this little bit of fear just going to a local meetup. I'm going to talk to three people. I'm going to hand out three business cards, and that's it. And then you keep going until you're like, no, I'm pulling the lever on this property. I'm going to invest. I'm going full force. I'm getting up on a stage. I'm taking 12 planes to get there, which I assume is what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, I love that. I love that. Back to the business side of things, I'm curious, how do you determine what your expected rent will be when you're considering co-hosting for somebody's property?
My goal is to always 1.5 times or 2x long-term rental rate. So I'm making sure that the market's going to work right. Like Denver has a lot of people that are coming in and out. It's a hub. It has a pretty decent short-term rental market. I think you guys have permitted or permits or some kind of issues that are over there. But even then, I usually find that a short-term rental market usually works really well as a midterm rental market because of people coming in, business travelers, things of that nature. So I try to find, I do research to find out, on Airbnb and Furnish Finder and Mashvisor, AirDNA, and see how much money is actually being made in those markets. And then we'll actually break down what we actually believe that property can earn based off of its characteristics, where it's actually located, if there's any hospitals nearby, if there's any new developments being built or new businesses being put together. So there's different avenues of like what type of clients that we go after. So it's really a good gauge to get all these different dynamics and be able to go to Krista as a landlord and say, hey, we see all these opportunities here. On the low end, we see that you're doing 2,000. On the high end, it could be 3,000. depending on the clients, but we just want to give a roundabout number where we think it would be. And a lot of it's kind of like sort of I'm not going to say a guessing game, but a game of, there's not any software out there that really tells us how much a midterm rental makes, especially if you're going to do like travel nurses, which is a different amount than say an insurance relocation claim. Temporary housing for a family that's been displaced due to a fire or something. Those typically pay, 3 to 5x long-term rental rates. So we have to do a little bit of matchmaker is what I like to call it, just to make sure that we can make sure the property is going to earn what we believe it's going to make.
Gotta love the matchmaker part. I think that there is such power in understanding just general projections and having the experience to say, okay, an insurance company is likely to pay 3 to 5 times what I would make in a long-term rental situation. So that lets me project what my earnings could be if I go down this route. What do you find with travel nurses? And when you're trying to price between the two, is there one that you're going after more than the other?
Yeah, when I first started, it was primarily all travel nurses. I ended up getting an actual contract with the hospital. The hospital paid us 2 times long-term rental rates. So which was pretty cool because in Central California, rent was about 2,000 for a 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom, 2 bath. And I ended up renting it to a hospital, and they paid $4,000 a month, whether they had nurses in that property or not, which is pretty cool. Um, so yeah, I like to shoot for the 2x, and normally a lot of travel nurses are on budget, so you have to be very thoughtful on that because they get per diem pay, which is basically a stipend pay per day. And I'll just give you an example. In California, it could be $5,000 a month, and those nurses still got to pay for their property at home, and they have to pay for living plus meals and all those kinds of things. So, if you have a home that's 3x long-term rental rates, there's probably a likelihood of they're not going to stay there because they're budget conscious. So I really like to make sure that I have multiple rooms. It's not just a 1 bedroom. And I know people that have 1 bedrooms, that's great. Like you could do that. I think that's great. But for me, I like to go after, nurses traveling in groups because there's going to be a little bit more income that's being able to be used there. So you have two travel nurses that are traveling together. The likelihood of them paying, 1.5 to 2x long-term rental rates are higher than if you just have one nurse in a studio or something like that. So there's just different variabilities when it comes along with it. But again, I like try to shoot for 1.5 times long-term rental rates. And if we're able to do 2x, great.
Okay, pretty good formula, very straightforward. I also didn't realize that travel nurses could travel in groups. In my head, it's always just like one person going off doing their duty, but no, you've seen groups of people come through. Is that easy to find?
Yeah, that's even more relevant now post COVID because I've noticed that a lot of millennials travel in groups. So it'll be, 4 or 5 friends that are from Arkansas somewhere and they're wanting to go to California for 3 months. And then they'll want to go to Ibiza for 3 weeks after they do their assignment for 3 months. So
Right.
I've been watching these trends since probably 2020 where a lot of travel nurses are now grouped together. So it's just friends that are traveling or coworkers that met each other. So it will be 3 nurses that are traveling together. And it's pretty common now. But yes, you're right. When I first started, it was usually just um, a lot of old school nurses that were doing, they were traveling by themselves, coming to Central California for 3 months, then going over to Idaho for 3 months. But since COVID, I've really watched the atmosphere change to more of a group setting. And you still have the one-off nurses, here and there, but I see more and more groups traveling.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, are there any other trends that jump to mind when you compare the midterm rental landscape now to what it was pre-COVID?
Now it's a lot more competitive. But that's not a bad thing because I believe that there's more of a need now than there ever was before, even pre-COVID. I think COVID kind of amplified that business traveler, you don't have to stay in one place, kind of digital nomad, remote worker type mentality, which fast forwarded, I think, years ahead of time. And we're still seeing a lot of business travelers traveling, travel nurses travel often, occupational therapists, doctors. We see a lot of that all the time. So the cool thing about it is I believe there's still a lot of people that are going to continue to travel this way. There's going to be a lot more people getting into this space, but there's still so much opportunity. In fact, Blackstone, which is one of the largest institutional companies, started investing. I think they raised, I don't remember the exact number. I'm sure somebody in the comments will correct me. I think it was $30 billion. And a lot of those assets are going to go towards midterm rentals, which means they're going to actually focus on um, hotels that have midterm accommodations that have like a stove and all these things. So when you start to see BlackRock or Blackstone, these institutional capital companies putting money into a sector, it's usually 5 to 7 years before the general public catches on. So if you could see again when these big companies like this make moves, there's a likelihood there's a lot of opportunity coming forward in the future. And I see that now with the midterm space. I just think it's going to continue to grow because of short-term rental regulations and more travelers. And I think right now we're still in the very small stages of where this is going to go in the future.
Fascinating. I do think that using Blackstone as kind of a not necessarily a beacon, right? But just keeping tabs on what they're doing and where they're investing does reveal a wealth of opportunity for smaller investors. You know, it feels like a savvy move to understand where the big dogs are playing. Not that you should content yourself to just settle for scraps, but there is something to the idea that if they are pouring billions of dollars into this, you might want to consider if you can move there as well. Future projections for midterm rentals. What do you see out there? Like, what do you think there'll be more co-hosting, or do you think that might fall off? Yeah, just general landscape. What do you think?
Yeah, the co-hosting side, I don't see many operators that are co-hosting on the midterm rental side. In fact, if you look at Evolve and some of these big companies like Vacasa, they don't do midterm rentals at all. And if they do, they're just listing on Airbnb and hoping somebody books the place for 30 days. I think the intuitive investors, like you just mentioned, are watching Blackstone and watching these big companies do things behind the scenes and then moving, kind of like skating to where the puck is going. Like we know that they're doing this. Same thing with midterm rentals. I feel like there's such an opportunity that's coming forward in the future that most people aren't looking at now. And if you're able to get in the game now, you're going to be able to ride that wave as it continues to swell, which I believe, is happening. We've watched it since COVID, kind of amplify. So I do believe it's going to continue to grow. More short-term rental regulations are going to force people into midterm rentals, and we're seeing, large-scale adoption of hotels and other things that are getting into this sector. So once you see that happen, there's definitely a lot of opportunity to still come forward in the future. So I think the best is yet to come, Krista.
Oh, gotta love that. Best is yet to come, Jesse says.
Yes, I believe that.
Beautiful, beautiful. We're quoting you on that. We've got high hopes too. So if people are listening to this and they're really interested in co-hosting, but they're kind of concerned about the financial aspect and, how this might impact their midterm rental business, can you speak to how co-hosting can actually protect your bottom line against your midterm rental?
Yeah, I love this. This is something that it took me too many years to understand, and I don't know where my brain has been, but if you're in the midterm rental space, you're going to have vacancy. You're going to have that. It's part of the game. It's part of the business. You're going to have vacancy when if you're a long-term landlord, which a lot of you listening are probably like, yep, I got to turn my place over. I got to find the right tenant. I'm probably going to be vacant for a month. Totally normal. It's part of the game. You're going to have that with midterm rentals too. The cool thing about co-hosting is that I can make, and we'll give you an example of my own properties. So this is a real live example. I have a property in Modesto, California. It's $2,200 a month is the mortgage. But if that property sits vacant, my co-hosting business makes over $2,200 a month, and I can essentially take that $2,200 and cover my mortgage. So it's a hedge against me not actually coming out of my own pocket. My business is actually paying for that monthly premium, which I think is such a cool advantage, especially people that are working W-2 jobs and you're just like, how am I going to manage all these things and how am I going to be able to take care of this? I don't have that much time. Well, you're already managing your properties already anyway. So yes, you do have a vacancy and your co-hosting business brings in that additional income that covers your mortgage. So essentially you're not coming out of your pocket for it. Your business is essentially covering it. I think it's such a smart move when you start to think about how can I cover this with A, B, or C. And I think that's when my eyes open up like, holy crap, I should be doing more of these things in different ways. Where essentially you're creating a business that's going to cover any expenses you may have. So for me, that was not only opportunity for myself, but also it gave me that kind of validity that I know if this doesn't rent out and I don't need to have, well, we should always have 6 months of reserves, but I'm still keeping my reserves, but my business is now paying that mortgage, which I think is pretty cool.
Certainly a smart strategy. It unlocks so much potential for you because, as you mentioned, vacancies are a part of the game. They're
Yeah.
going to pop up. But if you have something like this that can cover your mortgage while you are finding that perfect tenant, I think it also allows you to be choosier and find someone who meets all of your qualifications versus scrambling and maybe accepting someone that you would regret having in your property 2 months down the line.
That is so true. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of times people will have, they paid their mortgage a week ago and they're just like, oh my God, I'm thinking about the next mortgage payment that I'm going to make. And I'm just going to pick anybody that comes in. Maybe somebody's not meeting the credit score criteria or, there's an eviction in the past or whatever, whatnot. And you just decide to choose somebody. I've watched this happen. In fact, I've done this before myself early on in the game, and it's not a good position to be in. You know what I mean? So It does give you that flexibility, and you do have that understanding that I know I'm going to have X amount of money coming in on this end, and I'm not having to cover my mortgage. And for whatever reason, if I need to, that income is going to be able to cover my mortgage. And you already know that because you have the calendar of what's going to happen. Like, you already know.
Right? You've got that peace of mind. I think that circles nicely back to the idea of fear and fear tolerance in investing. While it's smart to go outside of your comfort zone and try new things, I think leveraging strategies like this, like co-hosting, and eliminating that fear that could otherwise push you into making a bad choice or stumbling. It just allows you to do so much more and to act with confidence. And that is a really big differentiator that I see between landlords who do just fine and landlords who really go on and build something great. So very excited and very thankful that you are willing to break down what co-hosting is and how it works so that our audience can hopefully take advantage and reap the rewards as well. If
Totally.
people wanted to learn more from you, because believe it or not, Jesse has so much more knowledge than just this little snippet we shared today. Where can they find you online? What should they do next to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can check out my YouTube channel where I give a ton of free game, just like we talked about here, but even more in detail. And that is on YouTube. Just type in Jesse Vasquez. I should pop up there. Or you can go to Instagram at the real Jesse Vasquez, and I drop little 30-second tips there all the time as well. So yeah, I'm excited to be here, Krista. And for all the landlords that are out there that are making things happen, providing housing for people, keep doing it. It's pretty cool that you're making you're learning and educating yourself in this space. And I'm just glad to be able to be a resource for TurboTenant.
We're so thankful to have you. If you have any questions about co-hosting and midterm rentals, or just want to share your experiences with midterm rentals, please comment that down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.